And welcome to Business Point. Today on the program, we'll go beyond the headlines to examine the numbers, policies, and implications shaping Nigeria's economy. Today, we focus on 6 major business stories making headlines, from mounting losses at the Lagos ports to oil revenue projections, power infrastructure, vandalism, fuel pricing shift, pressure on foreign reserves, and the government's plans to revive the textile sector. Let's begin Business Point after this break. My name is Ubong Osara. Today on the program, the first story we'll be looking at is about importers who are counting losses as container blockage disrupt Lagos port in Nigeria already. Okay, so importers are already counting losses at the Lagos port because of fragile port efficiency, which is once again under scrutiny as importers count heavy losses following persistent container blockage at Lagos Point. According to industry stakeholders, hundreds of containers estimated at over 1,500 monthly remain detained even after clearing all statutory processes with the Nigerian Customs Service and other regulatory agencies. These blockades often attributed to post-clearance intervention by security agencies have resulted in escalating and storage charges, contractual penalties from delayed deliveries, increased cost of goods passed down to consumer. Importers argue that the situation reflects institutional overlap and lack of coordination among port agencies, a challenge Nigeria has struggled with for decades. So what does this mean for Nigerian business at this time? From an economy heavily dependent on imports for raw materials and finished goods, port inefficiency increased production costs, weakened supply chains, and reduced Nigeria's competitiveness within the West African sub-region. And unless structural reforms are enforced, stakeholders warn that businesses may divert cargo to neighboring ports, further hurting Nigeria's government revenue at this time. And this has actually been a recurring decimal. A lot of times we still see importers come to talk about how they are delayed at the ports when they get containers to the ports. Inefficiency, delay, their containers are detained for some time, and it affects the wider economy because most of these containers that are coming in are either raw materials that are needed by industries, are needed by factories to be able to get into processed goods and get services done. So you can imagine the number of time and hours that they have to wait, right? Just keep waiting because of this particular inefficiency at our ports. And this is something that, yes, there have been several ways to see how to manage the challenges, but it is still very recurring at this time, and it is challenging Nigeria's ability because we have ports in the neighboring countries like Benin Republic, right? They have a port in Benin, all right? So people could talk about, are we going to be diverting to Benin? Are we going to be diverting to Ghana? Those are options that business may have at this point, and it will come back to affect our economy as a nation because at the end of the day, the clearance fees are paid to custom, and it translates to monies that are being put into our budgets, put into critical sectors like health, finance, education, and the rest. And sometimes the importers are saying that the situation is as a result of some of the challenges they have with institution overlap, right? And they argue that the situation reflects the weak coordination among the agencies at the port, and it is challenging our businesses at this time. Contractual penalties, some of the things that they stand to face from that point of doing business, because the storage charges that they keep incurring as a result of their goods being stocked at Lagos ports is not what they want at this time to be able to do business. But we just keep seeing it, and importers at this moment are talking about it, that container blockage has actually disrupted Lagos port as of today. All right, so people could talk about the rush to bring goods into the country at this time because it is a festive season. A lot of things people are sending in, a lot of materials, and they could be challenging to be able to clear all of these materials one after the other, right? They talk about that as to the port efficiency, how they go about doing the clearance one after the other to be sure, and all of that. But can we do it faster? Are there ways? Can we automate it? Are there processes? What are the things that we could do with technology to help at this particular time? Because we need to get to do this business and earn the revenue and earn the reputation that Nigeria's ports you can get in your container, get in your equipment into Nigeria and clear in no time. So the businesses also don't suffer, because like I mentioned earlier, most of the goods are going to factories, they are going to industries, and these industries will have to wait sometimes for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and nothing is being done because the raw material needed for production is stocked at the port. All right, so and most of these things, like some of those who have their goods there, I've talked about statutory processes with the Nigerian Customs Service and other regulatory agencies that has been attributed to this blockade, and even post-clearance intervention by security agencies have not, really shown much help at this particular time. But I believe that with listening, the government knows what to do and can go in there and clear the ports in maybe the next 2-3 days, so people can get their things moved out from Lagos. But it also talks about the fact that almost all 80% of all the port processes in Nigeria passes through Lagos. But yes, we have Port Harcourt, we have Calabar, that if we're able to work better, it will help, because a lot of persons will also divert to these other ports, right? Those who want to do business in the east, Port Harcourt is actually closer than moving from Lagos and all of that. So we have to even think about, we've talked about dry ports that we have to start thinking in this direction and interventions to make sure that our ports do not keep having this particular notion that when containers get into the Lagos port, it will take a lot of time to be cleared. All right, so we told you that importers are counting losses at containers. Blockage continues, disruption at the Lagos port because of the fragile port efficiency that we have at the country, and this is under scrutiny again as Nigerian importers are counting heavy losses at this time, especially at the Lagos ports. And stakeholders are saying hundreds of containers, estimated at over 1,500 containers monthly, remain detained at the Lagos ports, even after clearing all statutory processes with the Nigerian Customs Service and other regulatory agencies. All right, so these are things that we've talked about, and seeing how we can actually move our port processes, make it more efficient, make it more automated, make it more technologically driven to be able to drive the process. And that's the first business story that we're bringing to you at this particular time. Let's take another story this morning. Federal government projects lower oil revenue of 60.9 trillion naira. Okay, so the federal government has projected oil revenue of 60.97 trillion naira in the new budget. Okay, so the government is saying that oil revenue this time around for 2026 is projected at 60.97 trillion naira, reflecting a downward revision amid the volatile global oil prices and the persistent domestic production challenges. All right, so this projection signals a cautious fiscal outlook, especially given Nigeria's continued reliance on oil earnings to fund capital expenditure, debt servicing, social intervention programs, while at this particular time, the country and the government has talked about placing more emphasis on conservative budgeting to avoid revenue shortfalls. And analysts are saying that lower oil projection may be good because it will tighten the fiscal space, limit infrastructural spending at this time, but give the government the ability not to go into massive debt as we try to pay off the debts that we are owing and do debt servicing and all of that in this particular time. But the federal government government is projecting lower oil revenue for 2026 than what we had in the previous year, placing it at $60 to $65 to a barrel, and also saying 1.2 million barrels per day. If that is what is being drilled, 1.2 million barrels per day at 60 to 65. So the government is also at this point looking at the global oil dynamics and saying, yes, if at the point we get to $80 for a barrel, that's very fine. We get to $90 for a barrel, that's very fine. But we're going to play safe and stay between 60 and 65 for the projections that are being done. And this is what we want to do at this particular time. And analysts are saying, yes, it may be helpful, but there are also a number of things to point out, because it will tighten the fiscal space. It may limit infrastructure spending. We've also seen in that particular budget that defense and security takes more than infrastructural and capital spending, and may also increase pressure to raise non-oil revenue through taxes and economic reform, which the government is saying that from January 1st there will be a new tax regime that comes into effect, and this tax regime is coming into effect to see how to raise more money from the non-oil revenue base of the country and non-oil sector to be invested into capital projects and be invested into the country at this time. But we know that oil remains very vulnerable in Nigeria, because there are issues of oil theft. We keep talking about oil theft. There's this issue of vandalism, and there's also issue of underinvestment. All right, a lot of persons are not investing in our deep water oil facility at this moment. So we need massive investment in our oil space to tunes of billions of dollars to be invested in that particular sector to raise the oil revenue in Nigeria going into 2027. There's also issue of oil theft, which continue to be battled, militancy, oil stealing, pipeline vandalism. These are all issues that is facing the Nigeria's oil sector at the moment, and that is why the federal government say, okay, let's place a benchmark of $60 to $65 to a barrel a day at 1.2 million barrels to be sold in one particular day, to be able to raise revenue for capital projects in Nigeria. And why we're also looking at the non-oil sectors to raise more revenue, like taxes, agriculture, and other sectors that can actually help Nigeria at this time. Okay. The world at the moment is talking about global energy transition, and the trend continues to reshape demand dynamics, but the message is very clear. Nigeria's diversification agenda is no longer optional. It is very urgent at the moment, and Nigeria must diversify its revenue as quickly as possible, right? Diversify to other means. We've seen taxes, which the government have talked about the fact that, yes, we have to raise our ability to pay more taxes in the country, and we have to look at reforms to be able to move different sectors. Agriculture, we've talked about. The president was very clear during his budget presentation at the National Assembly. He mentioned that the Bank of Agriculture will be given a mandate to raise that particular sector for export, to earn foreign reserve, to earn forex needed to put into capital projects at this particular time in our nationhood. And this is important because it looks as if oil revenue may keep going down going forward into the future. A lot of countries are looking at going green. That's something at this particular time. And Nigeria is used to depend 80% to 85% of our budget was funded from proceeds of oil. And if we cannot, it will lead to a serious oil shortfall that may affect a lot of investment, affect a lot of companies, affect a lot of people, because that particular sector also employs millions of Nigerians too, both directly and indirectly. All right, so we have to be clear about how we are able to manage this. But I think the government is also clear that, yes, going to the future, our oil revenue may not meet the target it used to meet some 20 years ago, some 15 years ago. We have to be clear into going into non-oil sector to raise revenue, to be able to do critical infrastructure and diversify Nigeria's economy, because this is no longer optional. It is urgent at this particular time. Let's take another story this morning. TCN, the transmission company of Nigeria, records 131 vandalism cases in 2025. The transmission company of Nigeria records 131 vandalism cases in 2025. Right, so despite recording a historic 5,801 megawatts peak electricity transmission this year, it's never happened before. This year, the TCN recorded 5,801 megawatts at a particular time. That's the peak, transmission that we've had in Nigeria, and this is practically very amazing, from the TCN. But the transmission company of Nigeria, is reporting that they've had cases of 131 vandalism incidents across Nigeria, especially talking about National Grid in 2025. And some of the attacks were targeted at transmission tower, power lines, substation, infrastructure, and each incident results in outages, costing more for repair and loss of supply to households and industry. But let me just stay here for a minute and looking at the records that the TCN has actually brought around, that they've recorded 131 vandalism cases in 2025. At this particular time, we need to be able to look ourselves and tell ourselves the truth, right? When people vandalize electric pipelines, electric lines, they vandalize poles, they vandalize infrastructure, and at the end of the day, the same people turn around to blame the government and say, we don't have power, we are cut out of power. But sometimes these are vandalized by people who stay in communities. Transformers are being stolen, are being vandalized in different places. And the TCN is saying that for 2025, they recorded 131 attacks to transmission towers. All right, they talk about power lines, they talk about substation, they talk about infrastructure. So majorly 4 things that are being mentioned here. We have the transmission towers, the power lines, the substation, and general infrastructure that were vandalized by people. And we can't claim, because we have to take ownership of government properties that are located in our spaces. All right, so if we have a power line, a power station, a substation, and a TCN infrastructure that passes through your place, we have to be watchful. We have to take ownership, because when it is vandalized, like they've mentioned, they spend so much money to do repairs at the end of the day, and each vandalism will result in outages. We have electric outages at a particular time. We have power outages, and it will cost for repair and loss of supply to household and industry, because a lot of household and industries depend on the power that is being generated and transmitted to be able to do business. So for manufacturers and service providers, unstable power supply translates to higher operating costs, because when there's no power, maybe somebody has to put on a diesel engine, and of course you pay more than you would have paid using the power, and this may be translated to the consumer at the end of the day, or the final consumer at the end of the day, and it will raise the cost of that particular good, service, or product, which will lead to having more inflation in the country at the end of the day, and people will complain. But these are cases that have been reported all over Nigeria. So higher operating costs, dependence on diesel and fuel generator, reduced productivity and competitiveness. While the TCN transmission capacity has improved significantly, infrastructural security remains a major bottleneck. And experts are saying that protecting power assets is as important as building new ones, especially if Nigeria hopes to attract long-term industrial investment. Let's go for a short break, and when we come back, we'll go. Okay, so I'm saying let's go for a short break. When we're back, we get to take the next other stories that we have on the program this morning. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Business Point on Global Television, and we're looking at business stories this morning. Another story we're bringing to you says Dangote launches 739 per litre petrol at MRS stations nationwide. So in a move to reshape Nigeria's downstream petroleum market, Dangote Refinery has rolled out petrol at 739 per litre across MRS stations nationwide. This price is widely seen as more competitive than imported fuel landing costs, intensifying pressure on fuel importers. And analysts are saying that this development signals a gradual shift from fuel importation to domestic refining, increased price competition in the deregulated market, and potential reduction in foreign exchange demand for fuel imports into the country. However, marketers also warn that sustained price competition could push importers out of the market, raising concerns about market concentration if not properly regulated. But Dangote is saying that this is a strategy and a turning point in Nigeria's fuel supply chain with long-term implication for price stability, energy security, and FX management in the country. All right, so Dangote launches 739 per litre petrol at MRS stations nationwide all across Nigeria at this particular time. All right, so let's take another story now, another business story that we'd like to bring to you. Forex Reserve Store as Naira loses 10 Naira to the dollar in the foreign markets. All right, so Forex Reserve Stores as the Naira loses 10 Naira to a dollar in the foreign exchange markets. So Nigeria's foreign exchange reserve has halted their upward trend as the Naira weakened at 10 Naira against the US dollar. This development reflects renewed pressure from import demand, external debt obligation, and portfolio investment flows. Although reserve has climbed to a multi-year high in recent months, analysts say the current slowdown highlights the fragility of the Nigerian FX position. But we've seen that the Nigerian foreign exchange has been very stable of recent. We've had 1,420 Naira to a dollar. It's been exchanged at that rate. We've seen 1,500 to a dollar. We've seen it exchanged at that rate. So there's been some level of stability at that particular level. But as of today, the Naira weakened at 10 Naira to a dollar. So a weakened Naira increases cost of imported raw materials, machineries and equipment, consumer goods, and in turn fuels inflation and squeezes business margins. But market watchers are saying that there's been, because of the series of forex flows that we've had into the country and some level of stability that we've had, especially when it comes to foreign exchange with our currency, Nigeria currency is doing very well in the foreign exchange market. In the last 6 months, it's been one of the most stable currencies in the world. There's been a downward flow. We've had, from when it was 1,700, we saw it come down to 16, 15, 14, 1420. But as of today, it climbed again by 10 Naira at the moment. But foreign exchange markets, experts are saying that there's nothing really to worry about, but they need to be a sustained forex inflow into the country and products that could be sold out of the country at this time, especially with a local refinery getting set. That was a lot of forex, searching fuel for Nigeria's daily need. If it is being done locally and it is being sold with Naira, it will strengthen the currency, and that is what experts are saying. And the confidence-driven reforms have been put in to stabilize the currency, and they're saying if the reforms are followed through and being put into practice, that we could see some more stability with the Nigerian currency at the moment. But the last story we're taking this morning says the federal government moves 50% upgrade of the textile sector in a bid to revive local manufacturing. The federal government is considering a 50% upgrade of Nigeria's textile sector. So, Nigeria's textile sector was once a major employer of labor in the country. We had textile sector in Kano, in Kaduna, in Aba, and in other places. The textile industry has suffered decades of decline due to power shortages, smuggling, high production costs, outdated machinery, and the proposed upgrade aims to modernize facility, boost capacity utilization, and reduce reliance on textile import. All right, so if effectively implemented, the initiative could create thousands of jobs, strengthen local value chain, support import substitution, and contribute to Nigeria's economic growth and especially at this time when the country needs a lot of forex to be able to come into the country. But let's look at all of the things that we've talked about today and put it all into one. In today's business landscape, there's a mixture of structural challenges, emerging opportunities from, we've talked about the sport inefficiency, FX pressure, to energy sector reforms and industrial revival. Nigeria's economic future will depend largely on policy consistency, institutional coordination, and private sector confidence. And that's our wrap this morning on Business Point. My name is Ubong Osora. I was standing in for the Queen of Business, Kike Lomo Okere. Keep doing business, and remember that Global Television does business. Bye for now.